Comrade, I would like to ask you something. Do you know whether the respected supreme leader prefers cats or dogs? Don't laugh, I mean it seriously. For decades, the outside world has fantasized about Kim Jong Un as a rotund rocket man with a formidably handsome big belly. His universe, we are told, is built from missiles, famine, dictatorship, luxury sedans, and hairstyles so ideologically disciplined that no individual strand appears willing to defect. Journalists analyze his trains. Intelligence agencies gather biometrics from his cigarette butts. Academics debate succession politics and the mystical powers of the Paek-2 bloodline. Yet almost nobody has asked the truly urgent question: is Kim Jong Un secretly a cat person? In a normal country, such a question belongs to tabloids, lifestyle columns, and corners of celebrity magazines. Is the president a dog person? Does the prime minister hate pigeons? Is that cabinet minister secretly dating her Pilates instructor? Pleasant little trivia, useful for filling space between a divorce scandal and a recipe for meatball pasta. But in the Kimdom, the leader's private preference is never private. Nothing involving the supreme leader is allowed to remain trivial. His coat is political. His horse is historical. His daughter's ponytail may one day become a matter of dynastic interpretation. If the leader loves dogs, it surely reveals his admiration for loyalty, discipline, and unconditional obedience, the three highest virtues of both canines and party members. If he loves cats, then this must have a profound national meaning. Perhaps he appreciates their revolutionary contribution to catching mice. Perhaps he respects their serene independence, aligned with the principle of Juche. And now, to the surprise of many, North Korean state television has just offered us a clue. Kim Jong Un visited a new pet shop in Pyongyang with his beloved daughter. The marshal personally picked up puppies, examining them with the deep concentration normally reserved for missile engines. Beside him, the little princess played with cats in a civilized, socialist style. If not with the leader's handsome face, one might expect these images from a Japanese family vlogger. In North Korea, the leader's pet shop visit is a policy signal disguised as a family outing. It tells us that Pyongyang's elite culture is changing. The state now wants to display a gentler, more polished urban life, one with new apartments, beauty salons, musical instruments, and enough disposable tenderness to purchase animals that do not plow fields or guard checkpoints. In this episode, we explore North Korea's very bizarre animal kingdom, where chimps smoke, horses become sacred, cats receive dynastic attention, and dogs may be pets, food, national symbols, or foreign policy instruments, depending on the season. Here, animals are sometimes more upright and dignified than humans, and animal rights are fully guaranteed as much as human rights. We will begin with the traditional roles of domestic animals in North Korean life. Then we will look at the regime's new enthusiasm for pet culture and Kim Jong Un's directive to cultivate a more civilized, socialist relationship with companion animals. Before entering the socialist pet shop, a warm thank you to all channel members. Your support helps keep our producers and editors fed. Without your financial support, we won't be able to concentrate on our production and have a consistent output. With all of our gratitude, thank you sincerely. Now, sanitize your hands. Let's begin.
These black-crowned cranes were presented to the great leader Kim Il-sung on April 10th to 76 or 1987 by the then Ethiopian president. The black-crowned crane belonging to the greedy is beautiful, rare and meek, and so it is raised a lot for ornamental purpose.
This episode is about pet culture, so before everything, we shall ask what a pet is. This sounds silly, but let us go one layer deeper. Would you call an Alaskan Malamute your pet if its job is hauling heavy freight across snow every day? If you are a Texan cowboy, are the bulls you ride people's pets? Is a barn cat a beloved family member, or simply a furry employee in pest control? At what point does an animal stop being livestock or labor, but become a pet? At the core, we can agree that a pet is an animal humans keep primarily for companionship, affection, comfort, and pleasure. It is not mainly there to plow a field, guard a warehouse, catch mice, lay eggs, produce milk and fur, or become dinner when the revolutionary situation becomes nutritionally complicated. A modern pet is, in that sense, an animal liberated from usefulness and a luxury of capitalist surplus. They remain alive, cared for, and expensive even though they contribute basically nothing measurable to production. This is why and how the pet culture was normalized in wealthy societies. Only after people have spacious apartments, good salaries, extra food, disposable income, veterinary clinics, grooming salons, pet insurance, and infinite emotional loneliness do they turn a dog into a child with paws and an Instagram account plus a birthday cake. But in the Kimdom, where even human beings are rarely allowed the dignity of being useless, the modern Western concept of a pet sounds almost decadent. Many kids don't even receive enough food, so how could they afford to raise cute animals that eat meat, occupy space, receive affection, and contribute nothing to socialist construction? Here, animals have traditionally been understood through function. A dog guards the house, a cat catches mice, pigs mean pork, goat becomes milk, a horse provides transport, or, if it is lucky enough to become a part of royal mythology, a white throne for the revolutionaries. So in North Korea, pets have always faced an ideological problem. They must somehow justify their existence through hard labor, practical utility, or unquestionable loyalty, just like any human subject of the Kimdom. This made the North Korean history of pets strangely short. North Korea only started using the term 애완동물, toy animals, as an equivalent term for pet in the late 1980s. It was the time of the 1989 World Festival of Youth and Students in Pyongyang, when and where foreign visitors and culture led to a limited exposure to outside lifestyles, and thus the term was coined. But still, an average household could never afford a Maine Coon or a Husky. If we retreat into medieval history, the Korean peninsula actually has a very long history of living with dogs, and that history was much more complicated than the clean modern distinction between pet and livestock. The earliest evidence of Korean contact with domesticated animals dates back to the 5th century CE. In the Goguryeo tomb, located in South Pyongan province of North Korea, mural paintings depict hunting scenes where dogs helped men to hunt the prey. One recent study by historian John Ho-tae argues that the dogs shown in these tomb murals fall into 4 different categories: house dogs, hunting dogs, tomb guarding dogs, and soul guiding dogs. The dogs not only guarded households and helped aristocrats hunt, they also protected the tomb and escorted the deceased into the next world. In other words, ancient Korean dogs were workers and companions in life, and servants of the afterlife. That made dogs a very distinctive species. Unlike those other animals that were worshipped, feared, or ignored, Dogs lived around people and shared a human rhythm of life. When the master hunted, the dog ran beside him. When the master died, the dog appeared on the tomb wall. Long before modern breeds acquired pedigree certificates and Instagram pages, Korean dogs were already being shaped into images and buried in graves. Archaeological studies of the Dugnoille, a bobtailed Korean local breed, suggest that these buddies were part of the Korean household at least since the 6th century, as evidenced by their excavated tomb clay figurines. So, dogs had always been people's best buddies, and Koreans were emotionally attached to these lovely creatures from the get-go. By the Joseon period, this emotional closeness became even clearer in poetry, painting, and literature. Dogs became a visual shorthand for a peaceful village and a stable household. If the chicken pecks quietly in the yard and the dog rests nearby, all is well with the world. No famine, no rebellion, no family dispute, no cousin denouncing you to the county magistrate. Just a perfect domestic order. And those Joseon aristocrats developed a dog culture resembling today's capitalist pet culture. Richer men loved casting metal bells for their dogs, which signaled wealth and status. With a bell attached, the precious hunting dog owned by elites suddenly became a magical dog who was capable of warding off misfortune, at least symbolically. Yes, the rich loved accessorizing their dogs, regardless of time and space. It was this late imperial time when dogs finally stopped being just useful animals, but life partners of the rich. Though it's hard to pinpoint the exact timing, cats were clearly part of Korean domestic life by the 17th century. These felines began their career, as they often prefer, with the practical usefulness of catching rats. In an agrarian society where grain storage mattered greatly, this was no small contribution. A good cat was not a cute cat, but a small carnivorous grain security guard. Then, people started to complain that cats failed to meet expectations or damaged household property. Finally, Koreans recognized cats beyond their utility as objects of aesthetic appreciation and emotional companionship. The aristocrats began to care about breed, varieties, pupils, bodily traits, and all other extraordinary details. The painter Byon Sang-byok, an 18th century court artist, became so famous for painting cats that he was nicknamed Byon Cat. His works, especially Cats and Sparrows, represented the functional shift from cats being mouse catchers to cats as emotional supporters. The felines became worthy subjects of close observation, full of posture, personality, and alert intelligence. And think about it. A society does not produce a celebrity cat painter unless a lot of people have already spent a suspicious amount of time looking lovingly at cats. Cats had already become pets in late imperial Korea. As you saw, the Kimdom did inherit a lovely pet culture, although not exactly in the modern sense. Korean people had formed close, meaningful, and sometimes tender relationships with dogs and cats long before the People's Republic ever existed. A dog could be a hunting partner, a household guardian, and a subject of poetry. A cat could catch mice, but also become a beloved creature worthy of a royal painting. But then came the revolution. After Kim Il-sung took power, he smashed the old landlords, collectivized society, and remade Korea in the image of militant socialism. The adorable little pet quietly disappeared from the national imagination. Suddenly, all animals were useful again.
This year, more than 100 kinds of animals, including over 20 kinds of gift animals, have born over 1,000 youngs at the Central Zoo, which was splendidly built into a base for cultural life and education of the people. The two giraffes sent by the respected Kim Jong Un in October 2103 or 2014 and August 2104 or 2015 gave birth to a young respectively.
No pets, all livestock is kind of a socialist instinct. It is an old Soviet thing that revolutionary socialism had an uneasy relationship with things that appear private, decorative, emotionally indulgent, and economically unproductive. The new society was supposed to be rational, collective, and purposeful. Comrade Stalin, Comrade Mao, and Comrade Kim had little patience for the aristocrat's small, fluffy dog, whose chief occupation was wearing a colourful tie and receiving affection on a sofa. Harmless comforts could become ideologically suspicious. Historians noted that chocolate, for example, was denounced by zealous Bolsheviks in the 1920s as a decadent luxury associated with bourgeois self-indulgence. Amy Nelson, a historian from Virginia Tech, shows that pet ownership sits awkwardly inside the socialist project. The Soviet household was supposed to be remade around collective life, productivity, hygiene, and the rational use of scarce living space. But a pet dog created a stubborn little pocket of private attachment. It consumed food, occupied shared space, inspired irrational devotion, and belonged emotionally to only one household rather than being collectively owned. On the other hand, horses, cows, and other labouring creatures were greatly valued and welcomed to the socialist family because they participated in production. So, to be clear, socialism was unnecessarily against animals. It was against the wrong kind of relationship with animals. As a result, the playful cat and the bell-wearing dog did not survive the Korean Revolution. In the new republic, animals returned to work. Many of them still belonged to the family or the collective community, but not as pets, but as socialist workers. The dog guarded the yard, the cat killed mice, and it worked well for a while. Not because North Koreans had suddenly forgotten how to love dogs and cats. Human beings are really stubborn in that regard. Give a child a puppy, and no amount of dialectical materialism will prevent some personal affection. But for several decades, the North Korean state succeeded in pushing pets out of the respectable public imagination. I mean, they had no vet clinic, nor any pet shops. No socialist tailors making wearable for the Chihuahua, and absolutely no grooming services and cat sitters. How could people raise any pet without all of these very necessary services? But into the 90s, things were changing fast, not because of the official tenderness, but the black market inequality. The 90s famine was a national catastrophe. But as the state control waned, smugglers and black market profiteers quickly became the new rich, and some of them, with enough resources and free time, began to keep pet dogs as a sign of status and foreign sophistication. The practice was rare, but it became visible enough by the early 2000s. Small imported breeds, such as Maltese and Shih Tzus, were reportedly selling in Pyongyang for extraordinary prices, in some cases around $500, an absurd amount in a country where ordinary wages basically meant zero in terms of hard currency. The old landlords were gone, but somehow, after half a century of socialist transformation, the rich were once again using pretty dogs to signal that they were richer than everyone else. And surprisingly, the state did not seem to consider the little puppy a serious ideological threat. The wealthy households could always argue that they kept the dog to protect their properties from thieves. The dogs are not pets, but guardians of the socialist collective wealth. In 2001, the North Korean magazine Cholima described dogs as friendly domestic animals that could help people's lives and emotions, which was an unusually soft way of reintroducing canine companionship in a socialist context. This did not mean the Kim regime had suddenly converted to pet humanism, but it did suggest that pet ownership had become common enough among certain classes that the state chose to describe it rather than simply pretend it did not exist. And this pet culture continued to grow, especially after Kim Jong Un's succession. By 2019, the official publication of the Socialist Women's Union of Korea ran a very interesting article titled "Choosing a Pet Dog." The article specifically recommended the small breeds, subtly acknowledging that so many residents live in apartment blocks, and a smaller breed is easier to keep indoors. In some circles, selecting a dog according to personal preference, instead of picking up a random stray dog from the street, has become an urban fashion, and people already have a small related market. Finally, pets are tolerated by the Juche ideology and are allowed to fill up the scarce indoor space again. However, way too many people adopted their furry buddies, and the ideological trouble returned again. In March 2024, the same Socialist Women's Union of Korea ran another piece, warning its members against the growing trend of having pet dogs, calling it non-socialist behavior. The details of the criticism were wonderfully specific. Treating a dog like a family member who eats and sleeps with humans was condemned. Dressing dogs in clothes, tying ribbons in their hair, wrapping them in blankets, and burying them after death were described as capitalist habits with the stench of the bourgeoisie. Authorities reportedly insisted that dogs should be raised outdoors, according to their nature, and spoke of them in terms of meat and fur rather than companionship. In this sense, a pet dog does not merely consume food, but broadcasts inequality. This is a country that still speaks the language of collective hardship, and the impoverished vast majority cannot secure any meat for tomorrow's dinner. In this context, a pampered pet potentially makes average folks understand how screwed up their lives are. But recently, North Korea just had its groundbreaking pet revolution. On April 3, 2026, North Korean state media reported that Kim visited the newly built Hwasong pet shop in Pyongyang's Hwasong district, accompanied by his daughter Kim Jong Un and, according to some reports, his wife Ri Sol-ju. The Hwasong district was one of Kim's flagship urban construction projects, with roughly 40,000 housing units completed through 4 phases in a span of 4 years. The pet shop was inspected alongside an automobile service centre, a musical instrument shop, a hair salon, and beauty facilities, all presented as markers of a more refined urban life. The official language was glorious. Kim said that the number of households raising pets was increasing in Pyongyang and local areas, and that this created a need for specialized facilities selling pets and pet supplies. He discussed pet care tools, feed and veterinary medicines, and called for measures to expand production. The Supreme Leader declared that these leisure and welfare facilities should become a valuable foundation for the development of socialist civilization, and even ordered that the facilities open by April 15th, Kim Il-sung's birth anniversary. Comrades, stop whatever you're doing, stand up and let us applaud for this ideological U-turn. In 2024, a dog sleeping indoors was a bourgeois enemy. In 2026, a 2-story pet shop with grooming areas, veterinary goods, animal feed, and retail cages became a foundation of socialist civilization. The dog isn't changed, but the leader seems to have changed his idea. State media footage made the point visually. Kim Jong Un was shown holding puppies. Kim Jong Un appeared especially delighted by the cats, watching them and petting one perched on a climbing tower. The political subtext was important as well. Our little princess appeared again besides his respected father. The dynastic message remained, but the aesthetic changed from Dr. Strangelove to Hachi, a dog's tail. The Paek-2 bloodline was now experimenting with softness. Weeks later, news agencies reported that North Korean trading companies had imported dozens of pet dogs from China, including Maltese, Yorkshire Terriers, and Beagles, along with pet food, treats, and veterinary supplies. Cats and parrots were being brought in as well. Clearly, it was a state-backed effort to expand consumption among Pyongyang's wealthy, now that Kim's visit had signaled the ultimate approval. But we should not mistake this for North Korea suddenly discovering animal love. The supreme leader did not wake up one morning, stare tenderly at a kitten, and decide to join the global pet parent community. What happened is that the regime has discovered that pet culture can be useful. It absorbs the disposable wealth of Pyongyang's new rich, making Kim's newly built Hwasong district look less like another concrete monument and more like an actual modern neighborhood. The puppy, in other words, has entered the socialist fiscal system. The new pet shop is not the beginning of an animal rights awakening. Even if some canines may finally be welcome as companions, the rest of them have not been relieved of their older patriotic duties. And one of those duties, regrettably, involves soup.
Competitors gather in their crisp chef's whites before a bustling scene opens up as state media footage shows busy preparations and bubbling broths.
경연 참가자들은 우리 민족의 고유한 식생활 풍습에 맞게 단고기 요리를 맛있고 영양가 높게 가공하기 위해서 자기들의 요리 기술을 발휘했습니다.
But this contest is celebrating a habit that creates a lot of noise in South Korea and abroad: the eating of dog meat. Notice that in North Korea's footage, there's no sense of shame, as these dishes are being judged in much the same way as you'd expect to see in any other cooking competition. The contest was held in line with the arrival of Korea's traditionally hottest days, according to the lunar calendar.
Yes, you've heard it right. Let me repeat, S-O-U-P, soup. When the daughter of the supreme leader gently strokes cats under the warm fluorescent light of socialist civilization, at some other, less beautiful corners of the kingdom, the dog becomes dinner. North Koreans don't call it dog meat, which sounds crude, overly anatomical, and slightly lacking in revolutionary culinary dignity. They call it dangogi, literally sweet meat, because the flavor is supposedly sweet, or becomes sweeter the more one chews. This practice has existed for centuries on the Korean peninsula, north and south alike. In agrarian Korea, beef was precious because cattle were the most valuable farm labor. Pork and poultry require feed. Dogs, by comparison, were more accessible to some households and became an occasional meat source. It might be counterintuitive that the dog meat culture was not only about hunger and nutrition. Academic studies suggest that the practice persisted on the peninsula because dog meat consumption was connected to ideas of stamina, medicinal nourishment, and summer health. In other terms, dogs are not ordinary livestock, but can be made into a restorative food, a dish that repairs the body under punishing heat. So, when the summer weather is unbearable, one should consume a steaming bowl of dog meat soup and cure their body. Modern air conditioning takes the coward's route. Traditional stamina cuisine charges into the heat with boiling broth. North Korea has preserved this tradition with remarkable enthusiasm. In the summer of 2016, North Korean media ran at least 7 separate pieces introducing dog meat dishes from late June to mid-August. State broadcasters called it a representative summer health food, praised its nutritional qualities, and featured restaurants serving sweet meat soup, dog meat stew, and other related dishes. One famous chef from Pyongyang, quoted by North Korean television, repeated an old saying: "If sweet meat soup spills on your foot in the 5th or 6th lunar month, it becomes medicine." I think Korean people have some of their own points, really. A bowl of boiling soup makes your body even hotter, then perhaps the original heat becomes emotionally manageable by comparison. The animal becomes morally suspicious when it receives too much affection, but culturally precious when it receives soup seasoning. But why dogs? Yes, dogs are accessible. But what do these canines have to do with stamina and bodily restoration? Why not bird or rabbit soups? Sadly, I am not a medical expert, but some say the East Asian people generally label dogs as a warming food that could replenish your qi, warm the kidneys, and strengthen the yang energy. So, pet dogs are capitalist excesses, according to the Juche ideology, but stewed dogs are seasonally therapeutic, according to traditional medicine. The Kim regime went even further, not only tolerating this culinary tradition, but actively institutionalizing it. In 2022, sweet meat soup was registered in North Korea as a regional intangible cultural heritage. It fitted a new trend of national pride. By formalizing selected foods, festivals, costumes, and folk practices as cultural heritage, the North Korean government tried to package the dog meat tradition into a state-approved national identity. So, the sweet soup is now patriotism in the form of broth. This helps explain why North Korea holds dog meat cooking contests with the seriousness other countries reserve for robotics competitions or Olympic trials. Yes, that's right. Master chefs of Pyongyang were all ordered to compete for the best dog dishes. In the hot summer of July 2025, state media showcased a Pyongyang City sweet meat cooking contest at Hwasonggak, a large restaurant in the capital. Around 200 cooks participated, reportedly twice the number from the previous year. Korean Central Television said the purpose was to raise culinary standards and allow chefs to exchange techniques. The dish was once again promoted as a traditional source of summer energy. Later the same month, North Korea held the national tangogi cooking contest at the Food Festival House on Pyongyang's Ryomyong Street, under the sponsorship of the Central Committee of the Korean Association of Cooks. The contest was not a fringe event, but cooks from major institutions went to compete as a state-organized culinary exercise, the kind of thing that receives bureaucratic sponsors, formal venues, governmental awards, and television praise. Similar hot summer cooking festivals are held in provinces as well. For instance, South Pyongan Province regularly held sweet meat competitions in the provincial capital, with cooks from multiple cities and counties participating. In other words, this is far beyond one eccentric Pyongyang spectacle, but rather a recurring summertime campaign in which the state actively dignifies dog meat culture through festivity and culinary professionalism. The latest dog meat update came on March 26, 2026. A new high-end tangogi restaurant named Tangogi Ryori Jeonmun Sikdang, Dog Meat Delicacy House, was inaugurated on the bank of the Taedong River in Pyongyang. Rodong Shinmun, the state newspaper, described it as a service base created through the wise leadership and noble love of Kim Jong Un. They said Kim had personally guided the restaurant's site selection, design and construction, though the actual work was probably done by somebody from the Pyongyang University of Architecture. Finally, a beautiful two-story dog meat restaurant was built in a scenic central location, near the famous Okrugwan noodle restaurant. But just 8 days later, Kim Jong Un inspected the Hwasong pet shop with Kim Ju-ae. The same regime, the same city, the same month, two very different career paths for Korean dogs. It is as if the state, fearing that foreign observers might misunderstand its animal policy, decided to clarify everything within a single week. North Korea does not believe dogs are either companions or food. It believes dogs are whatever the current state project requires. The animal changes category between pets and livestock without ever being consulted. Now, one might ask, if dog meat is officially the national nutritious summer dish, does that mean ordinary North Koreans eat it often? Not really. Here we encounter the familiar North Korean distinction between national culture and actual affordability. State media can praise a dish as a beloved folk tradition, while the majority of its citizens cannot afford it. In 2022, a single bowl of dog meat stew in a North Hamgyong restaurant cost about 12,000 North Korean won, roughly the price of 2 kilograms of rice, according to informants. The same report said ordinary residents were angered by seeing officials and wealthy diners lining up for expensive dog meat meals, while food prices were soaring. The dog meat dish is presented as a people's tradition, but the polished restaurant version finally becomes an elite pleasure. In the same way that Pyongyang's pet shop is not exactly for the average provincial household, the dog meat restaurant, like the new one on the scenic Taedong River, has never been a communal canteen for hungry miners. North Korea, of course, presents dangogi primarily as tradition. State media speaks of ancestral wisdom, culinary heritage, and the refined health logic of the Korean nation. But material reality still matters. In a country where cattle are labor and pork is expensive, ordinary access to animal protein remains limited, and dog meat has survived not only because it is culturally familiar, but because it has remained more obtainable than many alternatives in certain rural and working-class settings. It is folklore reinforced by scarcity. The high-end restaurants are too pricey, but working people do find workarounds, like preparing the dish themselves. So it would be lazy to portray North Koreans as uniquely cruel or bizarre for eating dog meat. It's a custom rather than casual sadism. In comparison, the southern cousins inherited the same tradition but dealt it differently. Although some old diners still defend the dish as the ultimate summer nourishment, animal rights activists condemned it as cruel, and younger generations now increasingly see dogs not as medicinal ingredients, but as family members with medical bills. Alongside the expansion of urban life and the birth rate collapse, pet ownership became mainstream, and the South Korean dogs moved decisively from the ambiguous category of domestic animal that might someday become food into the morally protected category of companion. A 2024 Seoul National University study found that about 80% of surveyed South Koreans had not eaten dog meat in the previous 10 years. 87.1% had no intention of eating it in the future, and cruelty had become one of the major reasons people rejected the practice. Politicians soon caught up with it. In January 2024, South Korea's National Assembly passed a special law banning the breeding, slaughter, distribution, and sale of dogs for food, with the key prohibitions taking full effect on February 7, 2027. The vote was nearly unanimous: 208 lawmakers in favor, none against, and 2 abstentions. The law does not punish a person for eating dog meat, so grumpy grandpas won't be sent to labor camp for nostalgic thoughts about soup. Instead, the law aims to dismantle the commercial system that supplies the dish. Slaughtering dogs for food will be punishable by up to 3 years in prison or a 30 million won fine, while breeding, distributing, or selling dog meat may bring up to 2 years or a 20 million won fine. This was not a universally celebrated liberation. Dog farmers protested. Some argued that the state had destroyed their livelihoods to satisfy urban pet owners and international opinion. Others demanded larger compensation. In September 2024, the government announced a plan worth roughly 100 billion won to help shut down the industry, including payments of up to 600,000 won per dog surrendered, while trying to rehome nearly 500,000 dogs still being raised for food. Animal advocates welcomed the ban, but some worried that shelters would be overwhelmed, and that the transition could produce a welfare crisis of its own. Even moral progress in a modern bureaucracy arrives with paperwork, contested subsidies, and an emergency adoption problem. After 2027, when the legal supply begins to vanish, one can imagine a small number of culinary reactionaries gazing toward Pyongyang with a strange new emotion, not ideological sympathy, but menu craving. The first South Korean to defect to the north for a bowl of state-certified sweetmeat would prove that the Korean peninsula remains one people, divided only by politics and restaurant regulation. Back to the north, dog meat is only one window into the regime's relationship with animals. The deeper pattern is broader and darker. North Korea does not merely assign different meanings to dogs, but the regime is dedicated to turning all kinds of animals into instruments of prestige, mythology, diplomacy, and spectacle. The white horse becomes a moving throne for the supreme leader. Zoo animals become proof of socialist leisure. So after the soup, we must leave the restaurant and enter the theatre. Because in North Korea's Animal Kingdom, being eaten is not the only way an animal can be used. In 2016, North Korea proudly reopened the Pyongyang Central Zoo after a major renovation personally ordered by Kim Jong Un. The official message was that the capital had a world-class base for cultural recreation, a modern leisure complex where the people could learn about nature, relax with their families, and experience the benevolence of the party through reptiles, giraffes, and concrete enclosures. Sometimes, socialism could provide civilized entertainment, not merely slogans and food anxiety. This newly renovated zoo has a star attraction. Her name was Azalea, a 19-year-old female chimpanzee. Her talent was smoking cigarettes. I am not saying it metaphorically. She literally smoked cigarettes. Her trainer often throws a lighter to her, and she lights her own cigarette or ignites one cigarette from another already burning. Zoo officials said she smoked roughly a pack a day, but insisted, with the moral seriousness of a tobacco executive before Congress, that she did not inhale. The visitors loved it. Crowds laughed as Azalea puffed away, bowed, danced, and performed other small tricks under the encouragement of her trainer. The entire scene was so absurd that it almost became charming, until one remembers that the entertainment depended on teaching a captive chimpanzee to mimic one of humanity's least dignified addictions. Unsurprisingly, animal rights groups were appalled. PETA accused the zoo of addicting a sensitive animal to tobacco for cheap laughs and ticket sales. North Korea's defense, once again, was essentially that the chimp did not inhale, and it is just a North Korea's Got Talent show. In another country, this would be the kind of scandal that leads to public outrage, resignations, legal complaints, and a grimly worded statement from a zoo director who has suddenly discovered the phrase animal welfare standards. In North Korea, it was an attraction. Reports from 2016 noted that the zoo had a dog pavilion, animal trick shows, a monkey trained to slam dunk basketballs, and doves taught to fly around and land on a woman skating indoors. It was a zoo, a circus, and a soft power leisure complex all mixed together. But more of that, it taught us that North Korea has no sense of animal rights. Animals possess no dignity on their own. They are functional, to make children laugh or to make the leader happy. If the state wants to make Kim Jong Un look like a sacred warrior king, then the horse must carry him to climb up the holy Paektu mountain. That's right, I am talking about North Korea's most serious animal abuse, which is Kim Jong Un riding a white horse for propaganda shots. Let us be fair, horse riding is a sport that does not automatically mean animal abuse. If it were, half of Mongolia would be on trial at The Hague. Humans have ridden horses for thousands of years, sometimes responsibly, sometimes less so. But Kim Jong Un's famous horse rides were not normal equestrian leisure. They were not a weekend hobby, nor a quiet countryside retreat for a man who needed fresh air after a long day of authorizing missile launches. They were carefully staged propaganda spectacles, performed in freezing snow on sacred terrain, for the purpose of turning the supreme leader into a mythological figure. During the 2018 nuclear standoff, our supreme leader wore a long coat, stared solemnly into the distance, and confidently rode his signature white horse through the snow-covered slopes of Mount Paektu. The state media says it is a great event of weighty importance in the history of the Korean Revolution. One former South Korean lawmaker, Dugnoille, publicly criticized the stunt at the time as animal abuse, arguing that forcing a horse to carry Kim up a snowy mountain for propaganda imagery was just as cruel as sweetmeat soup. That may not be a veterinary diagnosis, but it certainly captured the obvious moral discomfort of the scene. Kim Jong Un has long been associated with the Orlov trotter, an expensive Russian breed prized for speed, elegance, and prestige. In 2022, as rail trade between Russia and North Korea reopened after pandemic restrictions, one of the first known shipments included 30 horses sent into the DPRK. In August 2024, Russia sent another 24 purebred Orlov trotters, 19 stallions, and 5 mares, a shipment widely linked to Kim's fondness for the breed and the regime's propaganda use of white horses. Azalea the chimpanzee and Kim's white horse may seem like two completely different stories, if not polar opposites. One is degraded into a smoking clown for zoo visitors. The other is glorified into a sacred mount for a revolutionary monarch. But the logic is exactly the same. North Korea does not ask what the animal is, but asks what the animal can do for the kingdom. Some are eaten, some are caged, some are trained to mimic human vice, some are covered in prestige and marched into propaganda. But across all these categories, the animal's own experience remains irrelevant. Its value is assigned from above, according to the needs of the state, the tastes of the elite, or the vanity of the leader. So, is Kim Jong Un a cat person or a dog person? Sadly, we still cannot tell after this very serious investigation. He held puppies. His daughter played with cats. The state camera loved both. Perhaps the supreme leader privately prefers dogs because they are loyal, useful, obedient, and less likely to question hereditary succession. Or perhaps he respects cats because they possess the Juche spirit of self-reliance and refuse to be emotionally colonized by anyone. But by now, the answer barely matters. This episode was never really about Kim's private taste, but North Korea's attitude toward animals. In any normal society, domestic animals gradually escape the cage of usefulness. A dog stops being only a guard. A cat stops being only a mouse catcher. They become companions and family. Their value becomes emotional, not instrumental. But North Korea has struggled with that idea from the beginning. The old Korean world had some room for affection, but the socialist revolution squeezed those adorable pets out of the official imagination. In the new republic, any creature without a task looked faintly suspicious. The pet shop in Pyongyang looks at first like progress, and in a narrow sense, perhaps it is. Some North Koreans, especially among the urban elite, are now openly allowed to keep animals for companionship. Cats and puppies can appear on state television without immediately being denounced as bourgeois contraband. That is not nothing. But the surrounding system remains unchanged. The dog is welcomed as a pet only when pet culture becomes useful to the regime, useful for softening the Kim family's image. The real question of this episode is whether the Kimdom can tolerate any relationship that is not organized around usefulness, obedience, and display. Can a person love an animal without the state assigning that love a political purpose? Can an animal be valued without becoming cultural heritage, protein, or a part of the propaganda? Sadly, for now, the answer remains doubtful.